Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello, hello. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, yes, welcome to the second day of the Research and Involvement Series Resume Workshop today. And as some of you may know, that the Research and Involvement Series is part of STEP. And so welcome back if you have been to our past webinars. Yes, and then if you're not registered for STEP, make sure to register. The QR code is on the screen right now. And yeah, if you're registered for STEP, it ensures that you get the email reminders of like the upcoming webinar and workshop coming. So please make sure that you are registered for STEP. So that's how you get the email reminders about all the webinars that are happening within STEP. Okay, so we're in the middle of summer, but we still have a good lineup for the rest of summer. So looking ahead, next Wednesday, we have a webinar on how your college can support you at UCSD, and we have some deans of student affairs, and you can learn who they are and how they can help you at your college. And then next Friday, a week from today, we have how to connect with UCSD professors. So if you have interest on how to reach out to professors, how to reach out to professors, how to cold email, like what to say in office hours and all that good stuff. In a week from today, we will have a webinar on how to do that and a little step-by-step on how to draft your cold emails too, which I think will be really helpful. And then yeah, and then in 2 more weeks we have how to pay your bills. So if you have questions on that, we have some great people to kind of break that down for you. Okay, research and involvement series. So if you're part of STEP and you've seen that big poster board, so the research and involvement series is that orange section. All of these webinars are going to be on Fridays from 12 to 1, and we'll be using the same Zoom meeting ID for all of these meetings. So we have a good lineup for this research and involvement series. Last week was our first webinar, and we went over research opportunities at UCSD. Today is July 18th, and we're doing the resume workshop. Next week, how to connect with UCSD professors. On August 1st, we have a great student research panel from transfer students who have done research. And then lastly, we're going to end with experiential learning. So how to get involved with internships, UCDC, study abroad, and more stuff like that. All right, and so I will go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm the Research and Involvement Coordinator at the Triton Transfer Hub. My name is Elizabeth Vasquez, and so I'm the one kind of like putting on this orange section, the Research and Involvement series. And for your knowing, right, here's a couple of points on like who I am and what I can do for you. So I'm a full-time professional staff member at the Triton Transfer Hub. I'm also a liaison to the Undergraduate Research Hub. So I'm in close contact with the staff from the Undergraduate Research Hub. And so if you need me to connect you to somebody or want to learn more about the Undergraduate Research Hub, you can contact me. But last Friday we had a webinar on the Undergraduate Research Hub, so I recommend looking back at that one if you want to know now. I'm also a resource for you, transfer students. So I primarily work with transfer students for transfer students. And then I am taking appointments with new transfer students like you in the start of fall quarter. Yeah, so and more announcements will come closer to fall quarter, but once you do the research and involvement series and you get an idea of like how to get involved and how to get into research at UCSD and how it works, then we can talk one-on-one on what your goals are and we can work from there. Okay, so Mentimeter time. I'm going to switch screens, but we're going to do a little Mentimeter activity. You can use the QR code, Menti code, or the link that will be shared in the chat in just a bit. And then I'm just gonna do a little switch. Okay, so there's a QR code here, and then you can also join at menti.com using the code 55381553. But the participation link is also coming in the chat. So a couple of ways. Yeah, so the question is, how do you feel about crafting a resume? And this is more so of a temperature check to see where you're at, where you're feeling, and it helps me and my colleague Ron kind of see like where everybody's in. Okay, so already overwhelmed, outdated. I'll give maybe a minute or so for people to submit. Okay, so we got overwhelmed, unsure, outdated. Okay, unsure of the format, never did it before. Yeah. And I think it's helpful for you all to see what other new incoming transfer students feel about it. So I see overwhelmed is probably the big one, unsure. So um, I think it's helpful to know that you're not alone in how you feel about resumes, which is okay, right? That's why we're here to kind of learn, what new stuff that's coming into to consider when you are making a resume or a cover letter. Okay, people are like kind of like, okay, never did it before, unprepared, outdated. Okay. Any other submissions? I think this is helpful for us to know. Okay, yeah, totally okay to feel this, where this is why we have this workshop so that you have time to kind of think about, your resume, learn about it, and have time to process so that you are ready. So I'm just gonna switch back to the original presentation. Thank you for participating. Um, I was skipped to here. But why a resume workshop, right? It's a good time to prepare your resume for, if you're cold emailing professors, applying to research programs, if you're applying to on-campus jobs or off-campus jobs, an internship, study abroad programs. So it's good for you to kind of like have this foundational knowledge now, so that later on when you do want to get involved in maybe some of these things, you have at least an idea of like how to craft a resume workshop and stuff. Um, okay. And I was just gonna go switch back here really quick. Um, but we have a mid-survey for the STEP program. So you can let us know how you're feeling, what you think of the program, what can we improve, what can we continue. The QR code's there, but this will also come in an email as well. So just know that, yeah, we can send that over. All right, so that is my portion. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And I will hand it over to Ron, who is from the Career Center.
All right. Hi, everyone. So today, if you hadn't guessed, we are going to go over primarily resume, but we can go over CV, resume, and cover letter and really kind of talk through all of it. So just to give you an idea, I'll go over just a few of the resources, talk about some considerations as we jump into these different topics, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end to go over Q&A when it is related to resume, cover letter, etc. So just so you know, I know it can be overwhelming to do a resume. I know it can be overwhelming to apply to jobs and do a lot of things. So I just like to remind everybody that as you come here to UCSD, you do have a career center. At the career center, we do everything from having one-on-one appointments. We have drop-in hours. We have career fairs, virtual events, professional development, and workshop series. We have employers come to campus to talk to you guys. We do on-campus interviewing. If you need a space to use for a virtual interview, we have rooms you can rent out completely free for you guys to do. And we have a ton of resources to kind of help navigate on everything from looking at different career exploration tools to searching for jobs, applying to jobs, putting your resume together, a bunch of things that you can utilize to help you navigate a lot of things that you need to do for your own kind of professional development. So I always like to put a quick plug. I myself am one of the staff members that works primarily with students trying to get into healthcare, but all of our staff are trained and here to support you with your kind of career development throughout the time here at UCSD. So, as I might have guessed, a lot of you are in that kind of early stages of trying to apply. Maybe this will be the first time that you're going to be applying to a job in earnest coming up in the next year, or building on experiences in areas that are really interesting to you. So one of the first things we want to think about is, how do I build my confidence in applying and to different jobs, as well as in what I'm putting there on my resume. So some things I always like to remind students as kind of mental tools to help you through this process, right? Because it can be very overwhelming. It can be very stressful, especially if you haven't really done it before, and that's okay, right? So there are some things that we can think about big picture while we are applying and looking at jobs and getting out there, that can help us navigate the process a little better. And so some things to think about, and this is just a kind of level set here, is okay, I can focus on the things I can control, which is doing a little bit of homework on the places I want to apply, becoming a little bit more knowledgeable about what industries I'm interested in trying to get into, taking a personal inventory on, okay, what are my strong points? What are the things that I'm really good at right away? That can help me, right? That's building a confidence database, which we are then going to use as we apply to jobs, right? And then the other thing is know when to ask for help, and it's okay to ask for help. So you can go to the Career Center, you can go to mentors, make sure that you recognize when you need it and a little extra support, and kind of reach out, right? These are all critical things to making the process a lot more manageable and smoother for you as we get into applying to different jobs and opportunities and developing. And then little pro tip, be sure to network. So part of the job search is not just applying to things, it's getting to know people who are doing the things you're interested in. It's asking for informational interviews. The Career Center does workshops on that as well. But these are all things that we can do to help ourselves as we work towards applying. So I always want to lead with that, because the more confident we are in getting that information together for ourselves, the easier it'll be to communicate on our resume. So knowing these things about ourselves, or hopefully starting to know these things about ourselves, how do I start designing a resume? Right? So it depends. There's going to be a lot of differences in things that we are going to do to kind of flip through what makes sense depending on what I'm applying to. Okay, so some examples. If I'm doing things like healthcare or finance or government work, they want very plain, straightforward, no frills resumes, because they're trying to get through a lot of critical content. If I'm applying to places that might value creativity a little bit more, like, so maybe kind of a innovative tech or social media or marketing, then there might be some stylization things that we can do to make it more visually interesting, maybe use a little bit more color to make it pop, right? But we want to just make sure to think about our resume should reflect um, our audience, right? Who are we trying to communicate to? Some things I will say that we have to be mindful is, we don't want to make it overly complicated, even if it is in a like marketing or media based application. Color schemes should be simple. A lot of times the first thing that we're going to do is upload a black and white document anyways. And so we want to be very mindful of that as we are starting to put this thing together. So some key bullet points for anybody in general when we're thinking about resumes as a whole: digestible. So it's, we have kind of summarized information, bullet points. It should be easy to read. Another thing we want to think about with resumes, they can be up to 2 pages normally for most students, 1 to 2 pages. If we've done things, so say for example, I have a student who, before transferring to UCSD, had worked a part-time job for a couple hours, or excuse me, a couple years, and maybe they're doing 20 to 30 hours a week. They probably might have a bunch of experiences that we could talk about that actually gets us closer to a page and a half, 2 pages sometimes. That's okay. Um, Third bullet point hurts me a little bit. I do have a creative background, but try not to be too artistic, which means that there are going to be times where automated systems are going to not read additional images or extra fonts and formats. So we want to make sure that your whatever document you're submitting is going to read clearly. And I'll have additional slides to clarify that later. Other major considerations is, you know, most of the time, unless it's like a summary or a very short couple of sentence statement on a resume, almost everything else is going to be primarily within a kind of bullet point format. And then it usually demonstrates action. So a tip that we have from Google, for example, is I achieved X as measured through Y by doing Z, which I always found was an interesting format. We can also use other methodologies, but really we're trying to demonstrate something with the bullet points about the work. And then language should be active, so it should be you doing things, not things happening to you when we are talking about resume language. Again, more details to come. And the last major big tip is quantify and qualify information. So it's either kind of the nuts and bolts of deliverables and information, or maybe speaking to specific qualities and skills we've been able to demonstrate. So that's how we want to quantify and qualify. That being said, since some of you are going to be looking at research, sometime down the line, we are going to also have to talk about curriculum vitae or CVs. These are like resumes in a lot of ways, but can be different when we're talking from a academic perspective. So for my students looking at research, possibly pursuing a Master's of Science or PhD, eventually we may need to build a curriculum vitae, which is like a resume, but more geared towards talking academics. And so I put some kind of major comparisons, which is resumes are short and punchy and go over key targeted information, usually for industries, right? And then the idea is it really is a very kind of high level, let's break down key information. Curriculum vitae follows a different approach. One of my faculty members said curriculum vitae are as long as it needs to be. And it covers everything that somebody has done within an academic context, from research to courses, teaching experience. It is very focused on academics. And so we usually don't see this nearly as much unless you are going down a very heavy research intensive program or pursuing sometimes maybe doctoral work. But I do have to mention it since at UCSD, we do have quite a few students pursuing research. On a side-by-side comparison, again, CV, biggest things to note, you'll sometimes see a dissertation topic or doctoral background, publications, awards, teaching experience, lectures, professional groups around academics, grants, projects, etc. Resumes, on the other hand, again, very industry. So we're looking at titles, positions we've worked, relevant experience, whether it's paid or unpaid, potential coursework if we're applying to certain science labs that needs to see previous lab knowledge, uh, different leadership and activities and skills. Again, these are all things that are highlighted differently based off of our audience. So uh, I'm not sure if we could use the chat feature, but if we can, if anyone could take a stab at guessing how long does it take for recruiters to scan a resume, you'd be interested to find out how long it actually does take. Um, so you can use the Q&A box if you want to put it in. I might pause for just a second just to see if we do get any takers on the numbers. And if not, that is okay. I see 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Remember, initial scan. Any other takers? No? Oh, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. All right, this is going to surprise you all. 6 seconds. Now, again, I know, don't panic. 6 seconds, it just means that first impression that they take of a resume takes only 6 seconds for them to make. After that, then they decide, okay, do I want to spend time looking at this resume? So again, initial scan is different than once they actually are going to review it. So I make that distinction because a lot of people panic when they hear 6 seconds. They can still review the resume after 6 seconds, but they're making a decision within seconds if they want to spend more time. Okay. So that being said, that's why it's important that we have things clearly labeled, mapped out, and easy to read because a reviewer just wants to get to the important information in a way that's easy for them to understand, right? And so I have a 2-page example. I'm just going to highlight how it looks, and then we're going to break it down. So usually you have your name and context information at the top. There is going to be either a summary or professional qualifications right after that. For a lot of students, it's usually a couple sentences that helps align you to a type of work that you plan to do, followed by usually core competencies or skills. Sometimes we'll put education also in this area, and then we'll have experience or work history, right? And then for this version, we moved education, certifications, and other things to the bottom, right? So, one thing I will say, this is a great example. It's not always the right example, but sometimes it is a way that we look at how things are organized, right? So I'm going to break down some of these key components for you all. So name, contact information should be at the top. Right after our name, typically what we'll see is city and state, phone number, email address. If we have a LinkedIn profile, add it. If we have a LinkedIn profile, hopefully work with the Career Center or do a drop-in with a career peer educator to go over your LinkedIn profile and make sure it looks great for recruiters. If you have a portfolio, so my students who have either a visual arts portfolio or a STEM portfolio like GitHub, we can also include that in the in the initial header. So I always just tell everybody be aware of that. That can be a helpful tool for recruiters just to kind of get a quick scan of like, is there additional information that I can look up for this applicant? After that, again, like I mentioned before, we usually move on to some sort of summary or qualifications. If you see some really old school resumes out there that are templates, you'll see the word objective. We don't use that anymore. That's not a thing. With your summary or qualifications, it can sometimes be bullet points. It could also sometimes be just a couple sentences. All right. So it's just a great way to highlight maybe a couple key things you want to say that is top of mind, that kind of summarize the biggest talking points that you want to mention to a recruiter. And so if you want to do that, that's under summary of qualifications or professional summary. Newer is core competencies. It's similar to skills. Uh, if we're talking professions like academics, education, healthcare, nonprofit, sometimes government, core competencies are a big way that we sometimes assess somebody's abilities. They're very similar to transferable skills. And so this is a section that students can include. You'll notice that they are not the same as technical skills, right? So they're usually more interpersonal, and these are things that students can communicate about some key abilities that they have or have developed. And then, as a pro tip, I would also think about this as sometimes job descriptions do say what competencies they would like to see an applicant be able to demonstrate. Um, it also means that if we mention these, hopefully we can talk about skills or things that we've done in our work that really demonstrate these competencies. So I always want to put that out there. If we are saying we have these things, we better demonstrate it somewhere. Okay. So just as a sample, this is how it could look on that example I gave earlier. So maybe we have our little professional summary and some core competencies that we want to highlight about ourselves. And so you'll see things like leadership and team building, time management, data and analysis, right? So there are going to be different ways we can kind of preface that information. I get this question a lot, which is, do I include awards and achievements? If, like, say, for example, after core competencies, I put education, or before competencies and skills, I put education. We can list this separately on a separate area of the resume, or we can include it in education, depending on how long that list is. But these are things we can list on the resume as well. Same thing for my people in healthcare or anything that requires additional certifications. If I have a job that would prefer certifications, I better be putting what certifications I have on the resume. So also includable, still valid. And then this is how it could show up sometimes. So we have education, certification, leaderships, and skills, right? Again, these things can move around depending on what we want to highlight for the audience that we are working with. Okay. For experience, I want to highlight something very critical and important for everyone. If we're looking through this list, volunteering, internship, research, work experience, leadership, community service, academic projects. These are things that don't all require paid experience to have experience. Very important. I mentioned this because I feel a lot of times our students undersell the fact that you do have experience. It's just many times it's not paid. This is very helpful when we're first applying to jobs and positions. We do have relevant skills and experiences. We've just developed them through the things that we've already have had access to, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a paid experience. So I always want to mention that it's something we can workshop through a lot of times with students, but we want to be very aware of that, which is that just because it's not a paid experience doesn't mean we can't at least utilize it in a way to be listed as experiences on our resume. Okay. If we're looking at key language we want to use when talking about our experiences, this is just an example, right? So say I have done research experience on a project. Maybe I'm going to look at key terms I can utilize to show what I've done in that research, right? Critiqued, diagnosed, identified, surveyed, reviewed, right? Maybe I'm looking at a more administrative job and I'm interested in getting into finance. Maybe I did a part-time job where I'm responsible for, or not part-time job, maybe I was a student org secretary where part of my responsibilities is working on the student org budget, right? Then I can actually talk about budgeting, managing funds, uh, planning, planning events, right? Auditing how much funds we have left at the end of the year, right? So even though my experiences aren't necessarily a paid position in these fields, maybe I can use the same language based off of the experiences I do have. Okay, so using the right descriptive language on a resume can help align our resume to the industries we are interested in. So now we apply it in practice, right? So I'm going to give you a format and then we're going to talk through some examples, right? So some accomplishments here. So if I have a bullet point about something on my experiences, let's think about it. Okay, so action, project, result. That is another way we could talk about this. So action, project, result. So what were the actions I took to do something and what was the result? So a lot of my student examples come from my healthcare students. So preface that, apologize in advance. These are going to sound a little healthcare-y, but I think they're good examples. So first one, led pre-health student transfer orientation for 100 participants, resulting in a smoother transition for pre-health transfers. So what they did is they led this event. It was an orientation. It was 100 students, right? And the result is that it made it easier for those 100 students, right? Developed fundraising strategies which raised over 6,000 to buy medications for patients belonging to underserved communities in San Diego's North County community, and resulting in over 150 comprehensive medical kits. Great. So we have a lot of quantitatives here. We have somebody who was part of a student org where they did a bunch of fundraising. They bought medications for patients. And it doesn't have to be advanced medications. There were medical kits. So it could be as simple as a first aid kit. But now you have 150 medical kits for communities that need it, right? And so that's a way to kind of talk a little bit about kind of maybe marketing and strategy, but also trying to do something for a community. And then the last one is moderated public health discussion for your IM conference, meeting addressing health disparities, social determinants, which led eventually to a comprehensive debrief of key topics, right? And so I summarized that, but basically, this is a way for them to talk about public speaking. It's a way to talk about presentation and coordination, right? And so this is more of a qualitative bullet point. So I like to give these examples because these are all examples of experiences that could be useful on a resume that have nothing to do with getting paid. And so I like to put that out there just to make sure that people are thinking differently about their experience. Some other examples. So I won't read all of these, but I will say there's one example on here. I would love further elaboration. So if anybody in chat notices, which bullet point under better. So the original is responsible for organizing 2 conferences and applying for funding. That's the original thing that they were talking about with work. The better version now is actually details. So organize 2 inter-university conferences comprised of 150 to 200 participants each, secured funding and sponsorship from departments and managed budgets of 5,000 each, managed 25 volunteers, increase attendance at each event by 20% through design and dissemination of both printed and virtual marketing materials. I would argue most of these bullet points are pretty good. There's one bullet point that needs work. If anybody can guess if it's the first, second, third, or fourth bullet point, feel free to put it under Q&A as a box answer. I will give you maybe a couple seconds. If we can have any takers, if there's any bullet points that might need a little work, 1, 2, 3, or 4. What do you think? Thank you. Yes, that is correct. Third one, I would love to know details of how you manage 25 volunteers, right? You could say something like, over the period of 6 months, trained and managed 25 volunteers and to be ready to handle a full 8-hour day at a conference. Great. That gives me some context of time. Or maybe met with them bi-weekly and trained them for over 30 training hours over the period of a year to make sure that they were ready for the events, right? You can say any number of things, but further details is always helpful to give context and clarity. All right. Again, just a reminder, all experiences are relevant, right? So volunteering, internship, research, actual paid positions, unpaid positions, leadership, community service, academic projects. And then looks like my slides repeated, so apologies in advance. So with that being said, we're going to touch real quickly on cover letters. So if it's required, absolutely do it. If it's not required, still consider doing it. But keep in mind, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So if we're going to do a cover letter, we want to make sure it is very intentional, right? That we are doing it because we want to put every opportunity to communicate something important to the person that's trying to hire us, right? Some other things, it should address the person directly as best as possible. So if we don't know who it is, dear hiring manager, dear search committee, dear hiring committee, perfectly fine. Please do not leave to whom it may concern. Way too vague, right? As far as the structure and style, typically it's a standard letter format, so it's maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs. It is okay in maybe the body or some key talking points. If you need to bullet point it, sometimes you can, but please avoid using all caps or bolded words. Avoid abbreviations. These are things that can be descriptive and sometimes are not read well by the reviewer. So just please keep that in mind. The other things to think about with a cover letter, it tells a little bit of a story, right? Who are you? Why is this so interesting and important that you're going to take the time to tell me why you're really interested in the position? What are some of the skills you want to highlight? And then, gives them hopefully a sense of why this is something that they really should consider you for the position. Last bullet point is, if it can be copied and pasted, it's probably not good, right? You want to make sure that it feels specific to the position. As a hiring manager, I have hired multiple people before. I will say I've seen cover letters where people literally copied and pasted one cover letter to another and forgot to change the job that they were applying for. Ouch. Please be
Ooh,
mindful. Yeah.
Ron, can I do a comment here?
Yes.
I just ate an Oreo, so I might have a Oreo mouth. But as the lead person to hires for the Triton Transfer Hub, this year we had a fantastic cover letter, and it was wonderful. And then I read the next 3, and they were the same. And then I asked ChatGPT to read our job description and write me a cover letter, and it wrote that one. So yes, being specific, but also being careful because it's a great cover letter ChatGPT can write for you, but I wonder how many other people are using that same resource.
Oh, I have a lot to say about that. I actually have a slide for that at the end of this,
So
by the way.
sorry. So
No
sorry.
worries. But thank you for that because it'll make what I say in a few slides even more evident. Okay. So completely agree with that. Please be mindful, right? These are supposed to be tailored, specific, and directed to say why specifically you. And as ChatGPT is great, it doesn't really cover that as well as it should. So, key things it should answer. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but really think about it's really who are you? Why is this important? Why is the position important to you? How are you going to be a great fit? And why should I really think about you as somebody who really wants to do this position, right? It should tell me a story about that. In general, some basic formatting considerations just for everybody. There are things that are kind of the same between the both, right? Standard format of font and text. There shouldn't be any bleed text, as in like don't go all the way to the margins. Please don't shorten your margins and try and cram everything in. It's not a good look. Uh, you know, hopefully you're going to use some good buzzwords or key phrases that are related to the job that you're looking at, right? It should demonstrate impact, so quantify and qualify for both. And then you always need to review and customize, right? You can use tools, you can use Grammarly, you can use JobScan, but make sure that you are putting a couple extra passes on this thing to make sure that it makes sense, it reads well, and also turn to other people you know and just say, hey, can you read this and see, what did you get out of it, right? Ask for feedback. So those are things that you could do for both cover letters and resumes that I think are absolutely important. And then just in general, as a reminder, great cover letters really speak to more than just a resume, right? So you need to really make sure that you are demonstrating that you are a good fit. It is professional, it is polite, and it tells a story about why this is something that you should be a great candidate for. Okay. So real quickly, I'm going to give you a sample of what it could look like. So here's what it looks like at the top. There are some a standard address information if it's available. Usually you are going to address the person, kind of introduce the context and why you're interested in applying, sell yourself in the middle of it. So either bullet points or kind of some key highlights about what you have done that really shows alignment and fit, and then invite them to ask questions, interview, and then sign it. And you can include your resume sometimes, but usually if it were uploading it on a standard application system, you're going to include your resume anyways, so you don't necessarily have to have an enclosed resume. Again, depends on the system that we have. If you're doing a cold email somewhere, I have a lot of other things to say, but we can also go over that later. Here's a sample from a student who was actually successful in securing a national position for student employment. And so they were able to very succinctly say that they were applying for a public health coordinator position. They highlighted 3 very particular things that showed alignment with the job description. They reminded them that they were actually going to school for the area that they are applying into, or in a very related area that they were applying to. And then at the very end, before they closed it out, they did kind of restate that a lot of the things that were important or valuable to them in general were directly in line with the company or the organization that they were applying to, right? And so I like to use this as just a general kind of understanding of, cover letters don't have to be super dense, right? They can be very punchy and talk about very key points and make a good impression, even if we're not saying a huge amount. But the point is it was very intentional and targeted. Okay. So that is my spiel on cover letters. Real quickly, some considerations for tech and AI. I have to say it. I'm going to say it over and over because I review a lot of resumes. I can say quite a bit, but we're going to go over it together. Okay. So first things first, if you don't know what ATS is, you're going to need to know. And ATS is basically the applicant tracking system. So different companies use similar or software that reviews your resume first to kind of identify keywords, terms, and organize kind of a priority of how many keywords and terms and demonstrative language was utilized in this resume to kind of see if at least what's being said should, in theory, match a lot of what is necessary for the job. That is what ATS does. So if we want to think of it in the recruitment cycle, I would think of it as first there's the ATS review, then there's the HR representative review, and then there's the hiring manager review. So ATS kind of prioritizes. The HR recruiter then looks based off of how it prioritizes down the list. Those that make it through that then go to the hiring manager for final review. Okay, so ATS is kind of like that first pass. And then the 6-second review and then further deep dive is from the HR recruiter. So how do we think about our resumes and so how that looks when we're submitting to ATS? I'm just going to go over some key bullet points. I need to make sure everybody knows this because I see it all the time. So first thing, file format matters. I'll say PDFs can work, not all the time. So if you're going to submit a PDF, please make sure to make a recent copy. So within the last maybe month or week is fine. The older the PDF is, the more likely after system updates, these automated tracking systems will not necessarily always read PDFs the same. PDF files will degrade over time in how they're reviewed. So if you're working on a document, always have, like, say, for example, a clean Word document as your default so that there isn't any weird background programming or systematic things in the format that will show up funny on initial review. I can give some visual examples, but that takes some time, and I usually run a separate workshop on that. Other thing to keep in mind, ATS likes clean formats and key phrases. So stick to, unfortunately, if it sounds lame, traditional formats. So keywords like summary, experience, education, and skills are always going to be things it looks for. So we want to integrate that in the most appropriate areas. If I'm using the word summary, it'll say, okay, it's going to look at the immediate words after that to know if this is a summary that you are providing. If I'm talking about experience, all the things that I'm going to highlight to show relevant experience should have the word experience next to it. Whether it's relevant experience, work experience, other experience, we need that key word. Education is going to primarily look for what level of education, degree, and school. All right. And then skills, it'll look for a skills section. It'll also prioritize that and then look at that in relation to your experience. Okay. And some other key things to understand. It does look for excessive keywords being repeated. So if you say the exact same word 5 times, that's not making it any better for you. Usually it's looking for, are there similar words that help demonstrate things that are going to be helpful? Again, this is why action verbs and quantifiable and achievements can be helpful for them to kind of see how these skills are being demonstrated, right? And then usually you want to have your contact information, not necessarily as an auto header, but at the very top of the page. And then it'll use that to kind of scan and be aware of like linking your profile information. Okay. Now, on the flip side, us using automated systems and AI, things that it's good for, things that are going to be a problem. Okay, I'm going to just say it right now. There are things that we need to be aware of. They're great for brainstorming, they're great for refining and editing, but you have to personalize. I will say this right now, ATS will flag all applications that are heavily AI utilized. They will flag them, just so you know. They know. So be aware, if we utilize these tools, we still have to customize and edit these things. Okay. Besides that, you will want to make sure what it's talking about is accurate. I know a lot of people say, yeah, AI is getting a lot better at being truthful. Kind of, right? We still have what's called a high hallucination rate of data, which means it may misinterpret things that you say. It may say things that aren't actually what you feel or have done. And so we need to make sure that what we are saying is actually truthful rather than it just sounding nice, right? Because recruiters will know the difference. And then you have to kind of balance out what is really nice about how efficient it talks about things to what are the things that we truthfully want to highlight about ourselves that resonate and make sense with a human, right? Because remember, ATS is only the first portion of a three-part process. So both the HR recruiter and the hiring manager has to see the human being in this. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then again, last reminder, you should always review after using any tools or AI tools because it will flag resumes that are overly reliant on these things. Same with cover letters. So please use responsibly. Please be mindful of it. These are standard things that we want to be aware of. One last bullet point that's not on here that I do want to mention. A lot of templates available online, like on Canva and other places, use columns and items and images. That's great. It's not great for ATS and it's not great for automated systems. It will gum it up. So please make sure that when you're submitting these things that they are in clean, appropriate file formats that will make sure that your application gets reviewed properly and doesn't just get punted out as an error on the other end of it. So those are some additional considerations that we really want to talk about or touch on when it comes to resumes and cover letters. So some key takeaways: avoid clutter, right? Lengthy descriptions and density, not helpful. Don't waste valuable space. Keep it consistent. Make sure that you are keeping to important details. You don't want to bury the important information. You want to very carefully make sure you're not overselling or underselling what you can do, and make sure that it reads clearly, right? And then for my applicants that aren't aware, US formats are a little bit different than, say, international applications. So like, for example, we might see international applicants sometimes include their picture or other personal information. Do not include that on standard US applications and resumes. I do have to mention that. Some other key professional tips, right? Start with getting everything that you want to communicate on one resume first. And then once we do that, that becomes our template for then customizing to the position and the company or organization we are applying to. So it's okay to have everything all in one place. And then for places that and industries we're applying for, customize and tailor and revise as necessary to make it very targeted. Okay. Besides that, a couple key things I want to really reinforce: submitting and applying to places is really only maybe 20 or 30% of the process. A lot of it is networking, reaching out, informational interviews, doing research on the places you're applying, right? So networking is critical in part of this process. Besides that, I always tell everybody you need to give yourselves credit for the things that you're doing, right? It's not just about a paid job, it's about experiences. So what are the thinking about what you've done and how you can talk about those experiences is always going to be critically important, right? And then remember, as a reviewer, I don't know anything until you tell me. So it's always going to be your responsibility to really think about, how do I want to communicate the most important and valuable things about my experience as well as my skill set, right? Because I can't make assumptions. I need you to tell me, here is how I've done X in order to get the job done, in order to present and communicate well. These are the things I've done, right? So make sure that we are thinking from that perspective of, I really want to demonstrate these things for the reviewer. So that should wrap up. I know that was a lot of content, but we can kind of transition into Q&A or answering questions. And then while that's up there, just as a heads up, I do have just a slide. So again, my name is Ron Reyes. I'm one of the Career Center staff. Besides that, I also do flag or answer questions on HealthBeat, but I could also stop my share screen so that we can leave time for Q&A as well as anything else.
Thanks so much, Ron. I think that was like some really good information, especially about AI and as ChatGPT is becoming a tool that's more popular. We currently don't have any Q&A, but maybe while folks think of stuff, I did have a question. Can new incoming transfer students meet with somebody from the Career Center to go over resume, like right now, like today, this summer?
Possibly if they have their Handshake account set up. So make sure your Handshake account is set up. Please include as much information on your profile so that it's helpful for the system. And then when you book an appointment, make sure when you're booking the appointment, please give us notes. So that little comment bar can tell us what we're targeting, right? So I'm a new student, I'm transferring in, I'm in this background, I am looking at this job, I've applied to these things. Here's a Google link to my resume, right? The more information you can provide before the appointment, the easier it is for us to have that conversation and kind of really maximize on the time that we have. But yes. And then, ooh, now the questions are popping up. So a bit unrelated, but is the trying to transfer tries hiring? Are
Oh,
they?
yes. We
Okay.
are looking for at least one, possibly two student assistants. Okay, I see Tessa say two. Two student assistants to yeah, work at the train transfer hub front desk. We can give some more info if not already, but you can email tritontransfers@ucsd.edu. Email your resume and cover letter. And in the meantime, I'll try to look for the link for our job description and I'll put that in the chat.
And then I see something like, can you use class experience like chemistry experiments on a resume? It depends. So I'll give you an example. Say I have a student applying to a research lab at UCSD. A lot of these labs will say must have previous experience in doing these kinds of tests or these kinds of experiments or understanding these key terms in these kind of biochemical or chemical processes, right? So if you've done certain labs where those experiments were done, where you've already kind of done that experience in work, then it's probably appropriate to maybe include the relevant coursework along with the type of lab work or processes specifically called out in the position that you've actually done. Right. So like this position is a very simple one where you're going to start off on basic titrations and whatever. Right. Great. If I've done labs that have those same processes already, maybe I want to integrate talking about that where I can to make sure it's lining up with the work. So it can work with a little caveat if that's the only way we can demonstrate understanding within a specific process that they're asking for, then it's better to mention it than not mention it at all. Other questions?
I have a question that I
Yeah.
get from students all academic year, but especially in fall quarter from new incoming students. Um, and I guess more so it's a two-parter. A lot of new transfer students that are interested in getting involved with research, specifically, often come to me and they're like, I didn't do research in community college. Like, I don't know what to put on my resume. Do you have any suggestions for a student in that position and any tips of like what they can include on their resume?
Yes. So there's a couple different things and it really depends. So here's something interesting that I've noticed. A lot of the labs on campus on their website, if they're usually taking applications year round, they'll actually list what they would like to see, which is great. We don't have to think so hard for those labs, right? So that is a good opportunity right out the gate. Is sometimes they'll say, we would like to, we do take, if you are interested in working with us on the lab, please submit a resume, highlight X, Y, and Z, make sure to mention these things, right? So that is one thing that I always find helpful is if it's a lab, a lot of labs are very particular. Sometimes they'll have to mention specific things because of how they are receiving funding to make sure that they can get the positions and the intent of the research fulfilled. So that's one just general tip. The other thing with research that is going to be a little tricky is UCSD has a ton of research opportunities, but also a lot of people who are applying. So it's also expediency. So sometimes what we want to do is have already looked at previous postings or positions, even if they're not the specific ones we're applying for, so we can see the common things that they are going to highlight, make a kind of template ready to go based off of the things that they're always highlighting. So they say if I'm applying specifically to biology labs, you'll start to notice there are specific skills they want to mention all the time, right? And so we can start formatting a resume ahead of time with those specific skills or processes that they are highlighting. The other thing that would be very helpful is if we're talking, say for example, non-science research. So like there's humanities, public health research, research that's really about populations and data. Sometimes what they're going to be looking for is maybe we can highlight how we've looked at related statistics and data and that kind of information as part of one of our bullet points, like say for a class project that we did, or maybe some analysis that we did, right? And so those are different things that we can really think about as a starting point. A lot of times when we're applying to labs, really they're going to say, "Are you willing to learn? Do you have an interest in the area that you are applying to? And are there skills that you already have or have developed through an academic environment that we can then leverage on there?" And then the last thing I would always say is please also check out the Undergraduate Research Hub. They have a lot of people there that are dedicated to undergraduate students getting research opportunities. And a lot of times they'll have meet and greet programs during the year where you can actually get a chance to talk to some of these labs. And that is a really good way to find out what the specific labs want. It also doesn't hurt just to try networking too with the labs and people that are research assistants. Another thing I will also mention is that regardless of what major you're in, since we are in an R1 institution, there is almost assuredly at least one faculty member in your associate major who'd be more than happy to talk ad nauseum with you about their research and in general what they like to see in researchers. So those are some really good ways to kind of position it depending on what kind of research you're going to do. Oh, question just popped up. I'm a transfer student. I don't have experience. How can I build experience with anything? So, couple things. You might not have experience yet. Getting volunteering builds experience. Working with student orgs can build experience. Deciding to take on projects, academically can build experience. Looking at entry-level positions on campus to build basic experience, perfectly fine and valid, right? There are a ton of different ways to be involved. Just being involved and putting work towards something can help you generate that experience. Remember, just because it's not paid doesn't mean it isn't something valuable to start with when kind of building your initial pool of experience. One of the first things I did was I ended up being a secretary. My student leader position was community or secretary for my student org when I was in my undergraduate, which means I had to deal with budget, I had to be responsible for money, I had to deal with meeting notes, I had to deal with very administrative things. And that was one of the first experiences I had before actually working a job, was taking on additional responsibilities within an org just because we needed to do it, right? So experience can really come from anywhere if we kind of think of it from that way. What skills am I working on? Okay, let's see here. Where do I go to apply for on-campus jobs? Easy. Handshake. So if you haven't used Handshake yet, Handshake is the easiest way to get access to on-campus jobs. It is our basically our employment portal for current and recently graduated students. And so that's where students are going to be able to apply to both on-campus and off-campus jobs. You also have the ability to filter. So say, for example, if you are work study eligible, you can type in work study and it'll pull in all the jobs that are associated with work study, right? So it could be a very helpful way to get that initial on-campus employment. All right, and then for general student assistants or student jobs, would you recommend putting down job or work experience from, say, customer service, like barista, real to work? Absolutely, 100%. Working with people is critical. You're going to do it for the rest of your life. unless you are a hermit in the middle of nowhere, that's going to always be valuable experience. So, again, like I said before, a lot of my students don't give themselves enough credit for the work you've already done, right? Paid or unpaid, please include it. It is better to include something than nothing. And trust me, retail experience, customer service experience, that is not nothing. That is something, right? That is a definite something. There's a lot of things we can break down to communicate about that. And then lastly, if you're not sure how to communicate that, show up to drop-in hours or schedule a time, and we can always kind of talk through that with students.
Ooh, very nice and right on time. It is. Oh, Tessa.
I was going to just mention one last thing to the student who mentioned that how do they gain experience? That's actually something we consider when we're hiring student staff in our office is sometimes we have two really great candidates, but one might not have had a job before and others have, and they're well lined up that it will be a little easier for them to get jobs. So that's something that we take into consideration when we're reviewing applications of this person might have an easier time somewhere else versus this person seems really well qualified and they have the right skills and things that they're mentioning. And we'd love to be like the first place they have job experience. So I know on-campus jobs might be a little bit more lenient in that way, and that's always something to consider as well. That's different office to office, but something to hopefully make you feel a little bit better in your application process.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think overall, do not feel discouraged, right? If you don't have quote unquote job experience, that's okay. Right. And then, college and your time at UCSD is also the time to build up that experience too. All right. Well, we are at 102. I'm gonna go ahead and get stop recording.